Hello and welcome to SBK Unplugged, Sheldon Bosley Knight's land and property podcast. My name is Kate Gould and I'm the host of the show. Today I'm in the studio with Matt Burrows, who is our auctioneer and who heads up our auction department. Before we start, I would like to say thank you to Mill Street for hosting us again in their amazing studio. Thank you very much, guys. It's always lovely to be back here. So Matt, lovely to see you again in the studio, and today we are going to be discussing the homes under the hammer effect when it comes to auctions. So a few weeks ago I read an article in the paper which was sort of based on the homes under the hammer scenario, where it kind of gave the impression that if you go to an auction you can pick up a rundown property, do it up with minimal cost and then sell it on for some inflated price. Now, it seemed to me that that was not an entirely accurate sort of situation to give, really. So perhaps you might put us straight on that.
Absolutely. Cheers, Kate. No, I read the article as well. It's a very interesting interpretation of what the entire auction market is. As with any marketplace, there will be a proportion of the stock that is sold at auction that is perfect for redevelopment, that buyers might be able to get for a lower than market price position, then do work on the property and resell or indeed let. And that's very much the ethos of Homes Under the Hammer, the programme. One of the real common misconceptions with that programme is that it is a show about auctions. The reality is, if you look at the 1 hour segment, there will normally be 3 properties they showcase. They will have 30 seconds of the auction. They'll then have a look around the property. They'll take the buyers around the property and show halfway through the refurb and then the finished article. And then it's that question of what's it now worth? Are they going to sell it or let it? The reality is that they don't show any conversation with the seller or the auctioneers around why that person has chosen to sell. And it's only really aimed at properties that are needing structural work or needing refurbishment. It's the equivalent of going to a bank and knowing that that bank does savings accounts, but being completely oblivious to the fact they do current accounts and investment options and stocks and shares, insurances, as well as the whole plethora of banking options. It's one niche of a much wider market. With our property auctions, we sell anything with a title. Now that could be a £1 parcel of land that's about 20 foot by 2 foot, all the way up to a country estate, with everything in between. There are some properties we sell that are completely fire damaged, others that need a little bit of TLC, others that are absolutely perfectly good in condition. What connects all of the sales is the seller's situation and why they're choosing to sell, and that's what makes it right for the seller to sell that property or parcel of land at auction.
Right. So do you think then that perhaps the article and Homes Under the Hammer might give buyers an unrealistic expectation of the auction and the auction process and what's involved in buying a property at auction? Yeah, well,
a lot of buyers and certainly a lot of sellers have the impression that it's almost a bit of a closed club, that a buyer will turn up to one of our auctions, open the catalogue and think, oh, that property looks nice, I think I'll bid on that. The reality is that most of our work as auctioneers is working with buyers in the weeks leading up to an auction, make sure they have the ability to review the legal pack, go through their due diligence checks, and obviously make sure they're happy with what it is they are buying. Every property is different. Some have no problems, some do have problems, and if there are problems there, it is important that buyers are aware what those problems are and satisfy themselves as to how much work is needed, because if they are doing it for a redevelopment, they also need to consider the gross domestic value of that asset once it has been refurbished, considering the costs it's going to take to purchase the property as well as do the work to get it to a standard to resell. If it was as simple as turn up, put in a low ball bid, win the property, and 3 months later you've got a nice shiny asset you can sell for a profit, everybody would be doing it.
Yeah.
And there are, as with any line of property, people who do it incredibly well and people who don't necessarily do it as well. But if you approach every auction and every potential buy with eyes wide open and do your research and due diligence, it's a fantastic way to actually buy property a lot quicker than on the open market.
And for sellers, I would imagine that something like Homes Under the Hammer might cause them a bit of anxiety if they've never if they don't know anything about auctions or the process, but they have a property that they wish to sell, and they might be put off by thinking, well, I don't want to have it sold for less than it's worth. So how do you reassure sellers that perhaps an auction is the right route for them? Yeah,
I mean, we can give, as professional auctioneers, we can give advice to clients about which route of sale might be better or worse for them without ever seeing the property, because everything about the decision-making cycle around what the right route is has got to do with the seller and their circumstances rather than the actual property itself. So for example, we're working with an executor, their father's recently passed away, probate has come through and she is now looking after the sale of this asset for beneficiaries. And there is a pressure there in terms of time from the beneficiaries. They're wanting their inheritance quicker rather than taking its time. The property itself is in really good condition. Nothing wrong with it. It's recently been refurbished, redecorated. If the seller is demanding or requiring a quicker than average sale process, auction should always be considered. Nothing about the property screams auction. In terms of the preconceptions of the Homes Under the Hammer, because it's only properties that need work that would be great at auction, but everything about the circumstance with the seller means that it's right to be considered. And the key word here is considered. A lot of sellers also feel that auction is when they don't get a choice. I can't sell it on the open market, so I have to sell it by auction. The reality for all of our clients is they choose auction as a route. It is a choice. We have an estate agency arm within the business as well as an auctioneering arm, and our job is to triage what the customer needs to give them the right advice. A big problem we get faced with is when we've got a seller who is absolutely perfect for auction, but they feel that their house isn't right based on what they've seen on Homes Under the Hammer. And that is an objection that we get almost daily. And the reality there is that we simply need to showcase some of the properties that we have sold in a similar state of repair, similar condition, and demonstrate the successes that we've had over the years with similar properties. The golden thread that connects all of our auction lots is the fact that the sellers are wanting either an increase in speed, an increase in security of the transaction, or an increase in the transparency of the method of the sale.
So presumably for something like your client at the moment, the transparency for the beneficiaries is absolutely crucial, and so therefore an auction is the ideal route.
Absolutely. It's so whenever we're dealing with clients who are either selling due to a probate situation, so they're executors, or they have power of attorney over a friend or relative's property, or they're a charity or a local authority, or they're indeed a company where they have a property in possession, so that it's a repossessed property. All of those groups of clients have a duty to demonstrate they have achieved the best price for the sale of the property. A lot of clients and a lot of sellers misunderstand the difference between the best price and the highest price. Now, the highest price you can achieve for the sale, it's a finger in the air, it's a best estimate, it's a best guess really, because it's a professional saying, well, I think this is the best price the market's prepared to pay. But if that was ever tested, it's very challenging to demonstrate if nobody else was prepared to pay for more. Because with a sale by private treaty, this is a normal estate agency sale, offers are treated confidentially between the buyer, the agent and the seller. So there's no way of knowing that had a different party known about that offer, they wouldn't be prepared to pay more. Properties in possession will often face this, and you may well see on the portals, Rightmove and on the market, etc., You'll sometimes see an advert saying the agents are in receipt of an offer of 122,500. Interested parties to submit higher offers no later than this date. That's a public notice, and that's the only way to demonstrate no one else is prepared to pay more.
Right.
Or they can sell by public auction. Because I, as an auctioneer, will only accept a final bid once I'm satisfied nobody else is prepared to pay more.
Yeah.
And critically, that's at the end of a 6-week marketing window where any ready, willing and able buyer is able to participate in the auction. And we're very much an open church when it comes to encouraging people to register to bid and participate. So for any of those groups of clients, executors, attorneys, properties in possession, local authorities, or indeed charities, selling by public auction is the best way for them to go through their obligations as a client.
Right. Now, the other thing for sellers in considering auction, they might feel that, I'm not going to get a good price. But there is a difference between a guide price and a reserve price. If they have decided, they can, as your client, say, well, I think you've advised me that 200,000 is the market value, so I don't really want to sell it for any less. That's possible, isn't it? For you to say, well, I'm sorry that we haven't reached it this time, but if you want to come and see me afterwards, if you can stump up the money, then that's fine. But they're not obliged to accept a low offer if one is not.
No, that's right. I mean, when we're going through the initial conversations with sellers, one thing we're trying to achieve is to go through the different routes of sale, so the open market versus auction. The critical consideration here is where the seller wants to place their risk. Now, with an open market sale, they're controlling the risk when it comes to the price they achieve, but they lose control over how quickly the deal goes through and how secure that buyer is in place. We've all heard quite regular stories of sales taking 5, 6, 7 months to go through, and even worse, taking 6, 7 months to go through, and on the day of exchange, the buyer simply changing their mind. But they're controlling the price. If the timescales or the security isn't important to sellers, often that's the preferred route. They'll take a risk on how long it takes and how secure it is in order to control the price. When we're talking to clients who demand or require to have that control on the process in terms of speed and security, they do need to take a risk on price, but they're controlling what's the most important factor. Now, that risk on price is mitigated by the reserve price. So part of the process we follow is establishing what the reserve price would be with that seller. Now, the reserve price is quite literally their instruction to me as the auctioneer as to the lowest price they're authorising me to sell for. So when we're in the middle of an auction, if a reserve price has been set for 200, the second the bidding goes on or over that figure, I know that we are now authorised to sell. That doesn't stop how we encourage buyers to bid more and demonstrate the best price has been achieved. But critically, if the bidding does not reach that level, I simply don't have authority. I don't get any discretion on the rostrum. I can't interrupt bidding and 1 second there, ladies and gentlemen. Hi, Mr. Smith. Yeah, I'm in the middle of the auction. I've got a bid of 199. We simply have to withdraw it from the auction. Now, sellers then get the option of accepting the highest bid if that bid turns into an offer. So there is that safety net there with auction, which is important to note. Some sellers are concerned that what happens if I do sell it for 10 grand or 20 grand when it's worth 200 grand? Well, that would never happen because they're able to select their reserve price that we will agree with them in advance.
So that's a comfort for
Massive
sellers.
Comfort, yeah.
Now, one of the things that I'm always fascinated about when I watch Homes Under the Hammer is the amount of buyers who pitch up at the auction and think, oh yes, I'll bid on that property. And not only do they not read the guide particularly well, it seems, but they don't necessarily read the legal pack. And some of them don't even go and see the property or get a survey or find anything out about it. And then some of them, and I know this obviously makes good television, doesn't it? But for them, the horror and of the financial implications of that must be quite awful. So what are the golden rules when you are a buyer? I mean, obviously do your homework, but yes, explain why it is so important.
Yeah, so top tips for buying at auction. I'd say engage in the process as early as you can. So the majority of auction lots will go onto the market at least 4, normally 6 weeks before the auction. So engage with the auctioneer at the earliest opportunity. Make sure you view the property. And look out for any common problems. So look out for any potential structural issues, look out for any damp areas. Understand from the auctioneer why the sellers are selling. The majority of the time it is because of that speed and security element, but there could be a specific reason as to why the sellers are selling. You'll then be faced with a judgment call, is this right for me? So do your homework as to what you're wanting to achieve as an end result. It could be that this is your home to live in. It could be that this is a flip that you're wanting to do. You're wanting to add value to the property and resell. It could be that you're wanting to buy this for investment, so you want to get tenants moved in relatively quickly. But calculate in your own mind as to how much work it's going to take to get from your point A to your point B, and work out then critically a maximum price you're prepared to pay. So set yourself a limit. The next thing I'd say is critical is reviewing the legal pack, and have a solicitor review the legal pack. The portal we use is the Essential Information Group, a fantastic organisation. They handle the majority of property auctions up and down the UK. Their latest statistic they shared with me is 35.9% of all auction buyers don't read the legal pack.
Oh my goodness.
So they don't know what it is they're buying. They don't know the terms and conditions of the contract. They haven't had a solicitor review the title. They're going in blind, and that's never a good thing. Surveys, every buyer will have a different appreciation of risk. If you are a seasoned property buyer and you can identify the problems and you're happy taking a risk, then some buyers will choose not to have a survey. Other people are quite risk averse, and that's exactly what a survey is there for. The vast majority of our properties can have surveys done on them prior to going in. The only occasion when that wouldn't be the case would be if, for example, there's a health and safety risk, but it would be pretty obvious if it's a fire damaged property, and we cannot allow anyone in for health and safety, but that sings its own song anyway. The final thing I'd say would be to again engage with the auctioneer nice and early. So make sure that you're updated, or you're asked to be updated for any pre-auction offers, because some properties can sell prior to the auction. And get to the venue nice and early, or establish how you're bidding nice and early. Set yourself a limit, pour yourself something cold, and enjoy the process. Because critically, if you are the winning bidder, you'll have those keys within 20 working days. So it happens really quickly, which means you get to start your project a lot quicker. On an open market deal, you might put an offer in and the keys still aren't in your back pocket 6 months later because you're waiting for the sellers to buy on. So that can be quite elongated. With an auction, you get your keys a lot quicker.
Brilliant. Well, Matt, that's very good advice. Buyer beware, as always, one of those old adages that rings true. But thank you very much for your insight today. That's really, really useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate.
And thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next time.